In the early hours of July 3rd, 2025, something unexpected tore through the quiet sky over Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates. At exactly 4:15 a.m., 21 Iranian suicide drones swooped in like shadows in the night, catching everyone off guard. Among these were 10 of the latest Shahed, 238 drones, cutting-edge machines equipped with AI-powered evasion tech and stealth features that made them vanish from radar for a critical 12 seconds. That brief invisibility was all they needed to slip past the first line of U.S. defenses unnoticed. This wasn't some random strike. It was a surgical hit designed to cripple a vital part of America's Middle East operations. The drones targeted a strategic oil storage facility right inside the base, a massive tank holding over 1.66 million barrels of refined JP-8 jet fuel. And when that first drone slammed into fuel tank 3B, the results were nothing short of catastrophic. The tank exploded in a fiery blast that shot a towering 300 feet into the sky, instantly engulfing two Moon Abrams tanks parked dangerously close by and vaporizing the precious fuel inside. The damage was staggering. Over $890 million in infrastructure and fuel went up in flames, leaving a gaping hole in U.S. operational capabilities in the region. The strike not only knocked out essential resources but sent a loud, unmistakable message. Iran could hit deep into U.S. territory and cause real damage. Inside the base, chaos erupted as alarms blared and fire crews scrambled to contain the inferno. The firestorm lasted for more than 3 grueling hours, with temperatures soaring to 0 degrees, melting steel, and shaking the very ground beneath the command tents. The blast waves were felt for miles, disrupting communication lines and leaving 5 American personnel wounded, 2 seriously burned. What made this attack even more jaw-dropping was the complete lack of warning. The U.S. prides itself on early detection and missile defense, but these drones slipped past all sensors and interceptors. For 12 critical seconds, nothing was picked up. No alerts, no countermeasures, no response. It was a moment of total surprise, shaking confidence across military command. Behind the scenes, intelligence analysts worked frantically to unravel the attack's details. They discovered that Iranian military planners had timed the strike perfectly. They took advantage of minimal troop rotation on the base, thermal distortion that reduced radar sensitivity, and the fact that fuel trucks were parked outside for routine night operations. All these factors combined into a perfect storm that caught U.S. forces off guard. While this strike was a devastating tactical blow, it was also a psychological one. For the Pentagon, this wasn't just a loss of material, it was a piercing message that vulnerabilities still existed, even in the most fortified locations. By 6 a.m., the U.S. raised its alert level to DEFCON 3 for all forces operating in the region, signaling the serious threat perception. Across global intelligence networks, the footage of the strike circulated quietly, but with huge impact: the fiery explosion, the destroyed Abrams tanks, and the unmistakable technology signature of Iranian drones. The world was watching, even if no public statement was immediately made. This attack was not a simple act of terror or sabotage. It was a calculated state-level military strike designed to shake U.S. logistical strength in the Middle East and force a swift, decisive response. And that response was already taking shape behind closed doors. The fire raging at Al Dhafra Air Base quickly grew from a localized disaster into a symbol of vulnerability and a massive operational headache for the U.S. military presence in the region. For more than 3 relentless hours, firefighting crews battled fiercely against one of the largest fuel depot infernos seen in recent memory. The heat was so intense that steel beams within the storage facilities melted, causing structural failures, while fuel tanks were consumed by the flames and shockwaves rippled through every nearby building, rattling command tents and living quarters alike. The sheer ferocity of the blaze transformed the once orderly depot into a charred wasteland, leaving a trail of destruction that would take months to repair. When the smoke finally began to clear, the aftermath was grim. Millions of dollars worth of refined jet fuel, essential to regional air operations, had been either completely destroyed or rendered unusable by contamination and fire damage. Beyond the loss of fuel, critical infrastructure suffered extensive damage. 2 Moon Abrams tanks, those towering symbols of American armored power, were completely disabled just yards from the epicenter of the blast. Their once formidable steel frames were twisted, blackened, and scorched, silent witnesses to the destructive force of the explosion. Supply trucks that transported essential materials, communications arrays that maintained vital links across the base, and maintenance facilities where aircraft were serviced all bore the scars of the attack. The base's logistical capability was deeply compromised at a moment when readiness was paramount. Thankfully, the human toll was limited considering the scale and intensity of the assault. 5 U.S. personnel sustained injuries, with 2 airmen suffering second-degree burns, severe enough to require urgent medical care. The images and statistics hit a deeper truth that behind every number stood a human story of pain, fear, and resilience. Medics and emergency responders worked tirelessly under hazardous conditions, battling smoke inhalation, intense heat, and the constant threat of secondary explosions to provide care and evacuate the wounded. Meanwhile, firefighters risked their lives to contain the fire, working against a blaze fueled by jet fuel and engulfing everything in its path. Their bravery helped prevent the flames from spreading further, saving what remained of the vital infrastructure. However, the psychological impact of the attack within the U.S. military and intelligence communities was even more profound. Commanders and analysts at the Pentagon and U.S. Central Command CENTCOM headquarters were shaken by a troubling question. How could a coordinated swarm of 21 drones, including advanced Shahed 238 models, equipped with AI-based evasion software, penetrate the usually robust air defense network undetected, slipping past every interceptor without a single countermeasure being deployed in time? The failure of early detection triggered immediate investigations and an urgent review of radar systems, sensor coverage, and communications protocols across the region. The stark realization was that the American military's defensive shield had been breached in a way not seen before, exposing a critical vulnerability. By 6:00 a.m., the gravity of the situation had become undeniable, prompting the declaration of DEFCON 3, a heightened state of military readiness for all U.S. forces operating in the region. This move signaled a serious escalation in alert status and readiness posture, underscoring the perceived threat level. In a tightly secured video conference convened just hours after the attack, the Secretary of Defense, the CENTCOM commander, and the National Security Council poured over footage from drones and satellites. The imagery revealed in brutal detail the scale of destruction, black smoke pluming high above the base, charred wreckage of fuel tanks, and the mangled remains of 2 Abrams tanks. For military analysts, there was no mistaking the signature technology involved. The Iranian Shahed drones had not only struck, but had done so with precision that signaled a new chapter in drone warfare. What unnerved officials most was the evident failure of early warning and interception systems that had long been considered world-class. The U.S. military prides itself on layered defense systems, designed to detect, track, and neutralize threats well before they reach critical assets. But in this case, for a critical 12-second window, the drones were completely invisible to radar and electronic warfare systems, enabling them to slip inside the base perimeter undetected and strike with deadly effect. This invisible window, created by a combination of short-term radar stealth technology and sophisticated AI evasion algorithms, was unlike anything seen before and represented a dangerous asymmetric threat that demanded a fresh and urgent response. Across the Middle East and around the globe, allies and adversaries alike closely watched the unfolding crisis. The attack exposed the growing sophistication and boldness of Iran's drone capabilities, demonstrating a willingness to strike aggressively at American interests far beyond Iranian borders. At the same time, it revealed glaring weaknesses in U.S. air defenses, forcing military planners and strategists to urgently reassess their tactics, technologies, and readiness. The message from this strike was clear. Iran had not just tested American defenses, it had outpaced them. Inside U.S. military circles, the consensus was unequivocal. This wasn't an isolated incident or a random flare-up. It was a carefully planned, high-stakes provocation designed to challenge America's dominance in the region and signal Tehran's determination to leverage its drone program as a strategic tool. The balance of power in drone warfare had shifted, and it was now clear that the U.S. needed to respond with decisive force and renewed urgency. As firefighters finally subdued the blaze, and smoke still drifted over the devastated fuel depot, the battlefield was left with a cratered landscape and a sobering reminder of how modern warfare had evolved. In the 21st century, conflicts are no longer decided solely by troops on the ground or planes in the sky. Instead, they are fought through unseen technological leaps, cyberspace attacks, and increasingly lethal drone swarms. For the United States, the clock was now ticking. The initial shock had passed, but the challenge of responding effectively and safeguarding vital regional interests had only just begun. Just 90 minutes after the devastating drone strike at Al Dhafra Air Base, the United States had already identified the source of the attack. Intelligence quickly pointed to the Shahed Karimi Air Base in Iran's Yazd province, a major hub for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' drone operations located nearly 790 miles from Al Dhafra. Using a combination of high-altitude scans and signals intercepted by RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft, U.S. analysts uncovered the sophisticated methods behind the Iranian launch. The Shahed 238 drones, including the AI-enhanced models, had cleverly exploited encrypted burst signals transmitted from civilian trucks to evade American jamming systems, reducing their chance of detection by over 65%. This tactic highlighted Tehran's growing proficiency in electronic warfare and drone coordination, marking a new level of sophistication in Iran's asymmetric warfare capabilities. The National Security Agency's Kraken 2 artificial intelligence system analyzed the transmission patterns and confirmed that the drone strike was not an isolated or rogue operation, but a deliberate, state-coordinated military strike. Satellite imagery revealed extensive upgrades at the Shahed Karimi base, including expanded bunkers, fortified hangars, and a suspected AI command tower overseeing drone operations. These developments demonstrated that Iran's drone warfare infrastructure had evolved significantly beyond prior estimates, transforming the base into a formidable military installation rather than a simple terrorist outpost. This was no mere act of terrorism. It was an open declaration of military aggression against American forces and interests. By midday on July 3rd, the strike's impact was felt far beyond the battlefield, as global crude oil prices surged nearly 8%, sending shockwaves through financial markets and raising alarms worldwide. NATO issued an uncommon joint statement warning of the escalating tensions and potential for further conflict in the region, while U.S. Central Command CENTCOM elevated its readiness and repositioned key military assets to counter any additional threats. Within the Pentagon, urgent discussions took place, with senior defense officials rapidly preparing a retaliatory operation that would be swift, precise, and unmistakable in its message. At 2 a.m. on July 5th, Operation Desert Flash was officially approved in a secure, closed-door meeting held deep beneath the Pentagon. With no public announcements or press briefings, the retaliation would not be announced or softened by diplomacy. It would be delivered directly and forcefully through military means. From the Arabian Sea to U.S. Navy vessels, the USS Curtis Wilbur, a guided missile destroyer, and a Virginia-class attack submarine simultaneously launched a barrage of 28 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles. Each missile, traveling at nearly 550 miles per hour and carrying a 10-pound warhead, was programmed for surgical strikes on critical infrastructure at Shahed Karimi Air Base. Almost simultaneously, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, stationed approximately 96 nautical miles from the Strait of Hormuz, deployed a carrier strike package that included 12 FA-18E Super Hornets, accompanied by 4 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare jets, tasked with jamming Iranian radar and suppressing air defenses. Within 22 minutes of launch, the missiles and aircraft had breached Iranian airspace under heavy electronic cloaking, initiating a devastating strike. The Tomahawk missiles hit first, targeting and destroying the base's primary radar array in a massive explosion that sent a fiery plume soaring hundreds of feet into the sky. Precision strikes followed on 6 fuel bunkers, 3 UAV launch platforms, and a command node believed to house cyber warfare operations of the IRGC. These hits triggered secondary explosions as fuel and munitions caches ignited, creating a raging inferno visible from nearly 23 miles away. Moments later, the Super Hornets delivered a second wave of destruction by dropping GBU-32 JDAM precision-guided bombs that flattened 2 fortified drone hangars and destroyed over a dozen Shahed drones that had not yet been moved or deployed. The Growler jets simultaneously fired anti-radiation missiles that effectively neutralized Iran's Khordad-15 air defense systems, rendering the base blind and defenseless. The coordination and timing of the attack were flawless, inflicting devastating damage in a rapid and overwhelming assault. Iranian communications abruptly went silent, and emergency broadcasts confirmed at least 14 personnel killed, including 2 senior drone engineers essential to the IRGC's UAV program. Approximately 70% of the base's operational infrastructure was destroyed or rendered unusable. Satellite imagery captured frantic IRGC trucks, attempting to evacuate damaged drone components under thick black smoke, but the damage was irreversible. For American commanders, the strike offered a measure of redemption after the initial shock at Al-Dhafra. What had taken years for Iran to build the Shahed Karimi drone base and its sophisticated warfare network was reduced to ruins in less than 20 minutes. Aboard the Eisenhower, a calm voice broke the tense atmosphere on the communications channel, reporting, "Objective neutralized." Returning to carrier. 0 casualties. Fire had been answered with fire, and America had made it clear that such attacks would not go unanswered. Yet, as the smoke settled over the devastated base, all knew this was just the beginning of a dangerous escalation. The boldness of the Iranian strike and the precision of the American counterattack marked a new chapter in the volatile tensions playing out across the Gulf. Barely 12 hours after the devastating blow to Shahed Karimi Air Base, Tehran made it clear that they would not remain silent at 4:00 p.m. On July 5, 2025, Iran launched a sudden and fierce counterattack targeting U.S. assets in the region. 5 Fateh 110 medium-range ballistic missiles streaked across the sky, each carrying a 500-pound warhead and boasting a range of 185 miles. Their unmistakable trajectory was aimed directly at the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the nerve center for American air operations across the Middle East. The missile strike unfolded with terrifying speed and precision, putting U.S. defenses on high alert and testing the readiness of Patriot missile batteries and close-in weapon systems. As the missiles crossed the Gulf within 6 minutes, Patriot PAC-3 missile batteries locked onto the incoming warheads, while the base's CRAM counter-rocket, artillery, and mortar systems sprang into action, unleashing a hailstorm of tungsten shells at a rate of 500 rounds per minute. The air was thick with the crackling of intercepts and explosions, as two Fateh missiles were shot down mid-air, detonating in fiery bursts high above the desert sands. A third missile was intercepted by an SM-6 missile fired from the nearby USS Carney, which had been patrolling in high alert status. Despite this impressive defense, two missiles managed to slip through the protective shield. The first slammed into an empty stretch of runway, sending shockwaves strong enough to shatter 400 feet of perimeter fencing. The second missile struck a fuel depot, igniting a fierce blaze that injured 7 American contractors and temporarily shut down 2 hangars used for F-15 fighter maintenance. Damage control teams scrambled to contain the fire, which roared at temperatures exceeding 800 degrees Fahrenheit and threatened to ignite a nearby ammunition storage facility. The strike was not only a physical attack but a stark message. Iran was prepared to retaliate with force and disrupt U.S. operations in the region. Even as smoke billowed over Al Udeid, American allies took notice and prepared for possible escalation. Israel, in particular, raised its DEFCON level to 2, activating Iron Dome missile batteries near key installations and repositioning F-35I stealth fighters to forward bases ready to respond if needed. Saudi Arabia opened its airspace to U.S. aircraft, granting unrestricted movement for retaliatory operations. Meanwhile, 2 British Type 45 destroyers in the Gulf of Oman shifted from escort duty to full combat readiness, deploying Sea Viper missiles to strengthen regional air defenses. The risk of the conflict spiraling out of control was palpable among military analysts, who warned that any misstep or miscalculation could ignite a broader regional war, drawing in multiple state actors. Oil tankers adjusted their routes overnight to avoid hotspots, and global crude prices surged above 110 per barrel, the highest levels since 2022. The stakes were now higher than ever, and every action was being watched closely by all sides. In New York, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session to address the crisis. Russia and China strongly condemned the U.S. strike on Shahed Karimi, accusing Washington of destabilizing an already volatile Gulf region. In contrast, American diplomats maintained that their counterstrike was purely defensive, a necessary response to neutralize an imminent and ongoing threat to U.S. forces and allies. However, behind closed doors within CENTCOM's war room, the atmosphere was far less diplomatic and far more grim. Intelligence reports indicated that Iranian missile brigades stationed in Bushehr and Bandar Abbas were mobilizing, possibly preparing for another wave of ballistic missile strikes. As the sun set over the Gulf, a senior U.S. The commander's voice was caught on a secure channel, stating firmly, "If they fire again, we'll take the fight to their doorstep." The words captured the tense resolve gripping U.S. military leadership as they prepared for the possibility of further escalation. Meanwhile, the aftermath of the missile strike at Al Udeid was still being assessed. Emergency teams worked tirelessly to repair runway damage and restore operational capacity. The attack served as a grim reminder that, despite superior defenses, vulnerabilities remained, and that Iran's willingness to strike critical American installations was real and dangerous. Simultaneously, Washington issued a stark post-strike assessment. Satellite imagery confirmed that the Shahed Karimi airbase had lost 100% of its drone launch capabilities. There was no detectable drone activity, no radar emissions, and no thermal signatures from power generators. The base, once a symbol of Iran's growing drone dominance, had become a shattered wasteland. In response, the IRGC quietly began relocating its remaining UAV production facilities to a newly fortified underground compound near Tehran, a move estimated to set their program back by 4 to 6 weeks. Intelligence intercepts also revealed panic and disruption within Iranian ranks, with engineers working in exhausting shifts, supply chains rerouted, and rumors circulating of disciplinary actions against commanders who failed to anticipate the American strike. But the U.S. was not content with a single strike. As part of Operation Fortified Gulf, CENTCOM initiated the largest regional military reconfiguration since the 2003 Iraq invasion. The aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt sailed into the Gulf of Oman, accompanied by a carrier strike group including 8 ships, 2 Aegis destroyers, and multiple logistics support vessels. At the same time, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense (THAAD) batteries were deployed to the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, dramatically enhancing the region's missile defense umbrella. A surge of B-1B Lancer bombers from Diego Garcia entered the airspace, providing round-the-clock airborne deterrence in rotating 6-hour shifts. The cost of these deployments was immense, but commanders deemed them necessary to protect critical infrastructure and maintain regional stability. Cyber Command also elevated its posture, deploying advanced quantum shield protocols across all military terminals within CENTCOM's area of operations. This move was aimed at fending off a surge in retaliatory cyber attacks, which had already increased by 300% in just 48 hours following the initial strikes. The cyber war front had become just as active and dangerous as the physical battlefield. with both sides attempting to cripple the other's command and control systems. The strategic message sent by these coordinated actions was loud and clear. America's logistics and military infrastructure were not soft targets, and any attack on them would be met with overwhelming force. Back home, news coverage of the strikes and counterstrikes dominated headlines, fueling a surge of patriotism. Public support for military action grew significantly, especially among Americans over 55, with flag displays and vigilance increasing nationwide. As the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower steamed quietly toward the horizon, her radar continuously scanned the dark seas. Every crew member knew one unshakable truth. This was not the end of the conflict, but merely a warning shot. The Gulf may have quieted for the moment, but beneath the surface, tensions simmered dangerously close to boiling point. In the days that followed the rapid escalation, the Gulf region stood precariously close to the edge of a much wider conflict, with every move dissected and scrutinized by global powers and regional players alike. What had started as a series of precise strikes and counterstrikes quickly morphed into the largest military escalation the area had seen since the early 2000s. Iran's stealthy UAV assault on Al Dhafra Air Base, America's surgical retaliation against the Shahed Karimi drone facility, the volley of ballistic missiles fired at Al Udeid Air Base, and the surge of air and naval power from both sides combined into a volatile mix, a powder keg loaded with the risk of miscalculation that could ignite something far bigger. This confrontation was never just about bombs, missiles, or destroyed infrastructure. It was a complex contest of military capabilities, political will, and strategic messaging. Iran's drone network had been heavily damaged, its operational capacity crippled, but far from wiped out. Meanwhile, U.S. oil infrastructure, though reinforced and hardened, still showed cracks in its defenses, reminders of lingering vulnerabilities. The smoldering ruins of the Shahed Karimi Air Base stood as a stark and constant reminder that Iran's drone program had advanced significantly beyond previous estimates, forcing defense planners and strategists from Washington to Tel Aviv, Riyadh to Moscow, to rethink and recalibrate their regional approaches and contingency plans. The military exchange had redrawn more than just battlefield maps. It had shifted the strategic lines in the sand. It exposed the limits of traditional deterrence models and underscored how asymmetric threats, such as drone swarms and cyber warfare, are reshaping modern conflict. The high cost of underestimating Iran's growing drone capabilities, along with the grave consequences of targeting critical energy infrastructure, had never been clearer to all parties involved. Oil prices, always sensitive to instability in the Gulf, remained volatile, hovering stubbornly above ATA 110 per barrel, further fueling economic anxiety worldwide. Meanwhile, Iranian missile brigades were mobilized and on high alert, their readiness a clear signal that tensions were far from cooling. Every day brought new intelligence updates, warnings, and subtle shifts in posture from regional powers. In response, the U.S., the military's Operation Fortified Gulf, unleashed one of the largest reconfigurations of forces in the Middle East in decades. This included an increased aircraft carrier presence, the deployment of advanced missile defense systems like THAAD in the UAE and Bahrain, and a continuous air deterrent maintained by B-1B bombers, rotating in 6-hour shifts. On the cyber front, U.S. Cyber Command heightened its defenses, rolling out quantum shield protocols across military networks to guard against a rising tide of retaliatory cyber attacks, which had spiked by 300% in the 2 days following the initial strike. But beyond the hardware and battlefield maneuvers, the psychological impact of this volatile conflict was felt around the world. Dramatic images flooded news cycles, burning fuel depots towering into black skies, the thunderous roar of fighter jets taking off on rapid strike missions, and drone hangars collapsing under precision-guided bombs. These sights sparked waves of patriotism among civilians and soldiers alike, but also anxiety about how quickly the situation could spiral out of control. Analysts debated possible scenarios while diplomats scrambled to find ways to de-escalate without appearing weak or conceding strategic ground. Behind the scenes, covert negotiations and intelligence sharing among U.S. allies intensified. Israel raised its alert level, deploying Iron Dome batteries near critical sites and repositioning F-35I jets to forward bases, ready to respond at a moment's notice. Saudi Arabia opened its airspace to U.S. forces, enabling unrestricted movement for retaliatory operations. British Type 45 destroyers shifted from escort duty to full combat readiness in the Gulf of Oman, bolstering air defense grids with Sea Viper missile systems. These moves underscored an unprecedented level of regional cooperation amidst an atmosphere of crisis and uncertainty. The Gulf had become a tinderbox, and everyone knew it. The slightest misstep or miscalculation could trigger a broader war engulfing multiple countries. Yet, amid all this uncertainty, one fact remained unshaken. America's military logistics and force projection capabilities formed a red line Iran could not cross without facing swift, overwhelming retaliation. The doctrine guiding the U.S. response was not based on empty threats, but forged in the reality of steel, strategy, and sacrifice, with clear consequences for any who dared test it. As the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower cut silently through the dark waters of the Gulf, her crew vigilant and ready, commanders in distant war rooms recalibrated strategies and prepared for whatever might come next. The delicate balance of power, a fragile peace maintained through strength and constant vigilance, hung by a thread. For policymakers, soldiers, and civilians alike, the message was unmistakable. In this new era of drone swarms, ballistic missiles, and cyber warfare, the stakes are global, the consequences immediate, and the price of miscalculation devastating. If this story has helped you gain insight into the complex mechanics and high stakes of modern conflict, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Your support helps keep these vital stories alive, shining a light on the hidden struggles shaping our world today.